Good afternoon and welcome to Free Together, Free Apart, Hacking Family Success. I'm Eric Thompson, Executive Director of the Vermont Center for Family Studies. And I am excited to be having another conversation today in this space about the topic of polarization, one that is on many people's minds and one that I think Bowen theory has a lot to contribute to. And I'm pleased today to have as my guest back Lorna Hecht Zablo. Welcome, Lorna. Lorna is a marriage and family therapist from Southern California. She's a blogger and a writer. And some of you may have caught my conversation with Lorna a few weeks ago that was spurred by her interesting book review of a book that was written by a lot of people in the mental health field who were diagnosing Donald Trump. Welcome, Lorna.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be back. I'm assuming whatever feedback there was had some positive aspects to it, or you wouldn't have asked.
Well, I think it was a good conversation, and I know we'll have another one. And I'm also happy to have join Lorna and I today, Dave Galloway from Vancouver. Welcome, Canada.
Hello, eh?
Dave's a principal strategist for the Service Cloud area of a business called Traction on Demand. So he's a senior IT leader. And he also is a longtime Bowen theory scholar student with the group Living Systems in Vancouver. Dave, do you guys use what's your title with Living Systems?
I think they've put me under the category of resident intern.
Okay. Resident intern.
And hey, you, can you help me with IT?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
About how many years have you been studying Bowen theory, Dave?
I've been in the training program for 15 years. And the reason I do that is that Living Systems has a kind of a first year program. And then if you want to continue, basically there's like a 3-year plus just ongoing kind of thing with a different topic every year, so that people can just spend more time looking at the theory. And it allows me to continue to do counseling for low-income people under their sliding fee scale and stay covered by the insurance, because I'm not actually like an RCC.
Yeah.
So.
Dave, I'm really glad to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm a little nervous, but thank you.
Well, it's such an interesting topic.
Yeah.
So Bowen theory has a lot to contribute to trying to step back and think about emotional process in any group, families, and certainly at a societal level. There's a concept in the theory called societal emotional process. And I know Dave and Lorna, you guys have both thought a lot about this. So our plan today is to just talk, the three of us, for a little while, and then open it out to a conversation with the group. This time I'm going to try doing a little bit of that before offering you a breakout experience, those on the call, where you could maybe take a shot at trying to articulate some of your best thinking about polarization leadership, the nature of polarization, what it is, what it isn't. And then after the breakout, have a little more time to interact with Dave and Lorna and I. So I want to start with a big, broad question and let either you, Dave, or Lorna, you jump in on it. And the question is simply, what have you been thinking lately? I know you both think about these things, about this question of polarization in society, polarization leadership.
Go ahead, Lorna.
Well, in my private practice, if somebody says go ahead to the other person, I make them go first, but I'll give it a shot. Actually, what I've been thinking about, the polarization in some ways is pretty obvious with all you have to do is follow Twitter and you see that boing, 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 you know, and how fast the reactions are, how much insulting of one another there is, you know.
Mhm.
But I have been thinking about the emotional process in society. And Eric, you brought up last time Steven Pinker's work and his thesis that there's less violence than there was, and that might be a strong indicator of less regression in society than some would assume.
Yeah.
I guess what I was thinking about was that the idea maybe was modified to emotional process in society.
Mhm.
And so trying to plug in the 8 concepts of Bowen theory, or 7 of them, into that one.
Mhm.
And it seems like you see evidence of all of them.
Mhm.
And a big one would be overfunctioning, underfunctioning reciprocity. And just watching, so there is regression and there's progress. And they might be happening in reaction to one another. Is that another kind of polarization? What do you think?
Okay, so I'm bringing the group into this dialogue Lorna and I have had a little bit here. And I want to give you a little context for the question she just asked me. So I am, I would say, a fan, and I've been, it's been very helpful for me to study the work of Dr. Steven Pinker, the Harvard linguist, who has written 2 books on society and societal emotional process. One is The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence is Declining, which is a very thick book where he gathers what he considers to be the best research on the topic of violence and the history of violence and the current state of violence in the world. And he asserts in that book that violence has dramatically declined over the last 200 years and continues to dramatically decline, like since the 90s, for example. So that book is fascinating to me. And he wrote another book called Enlightenment Now, which looks at processes more broadly, like climate and health, wealth. So I was saying to Lorna, you know, we're sort of exploring this basic question: is society less emotionally mature now, say, than it was in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s? And is society more polarized than it used to be? I think you can read, I think, every day in the paper the assertion that we are more polarized in American society than we've ever been before. So I was kind of questioning that. I'm not convinced. And I said to Lorna, you know, if violence is declining, which I think it's there's a lot of people who agree with that, careful sociologists who agree with the idea that violence is declining, which, if you're on the call and you disagree, I'd love to hear why you think it isn't declining. But I think it is declining. Then how could society be getting less mature emotionally? Violence, such a fundamental feature of emotional process between people, is declining. It's just questioning the assumption that we are getting less mature. So that's kind of the context of our conversation. How did I summarize that, Lorna?
I would think about society being, sorry, the trolley does go behind me occasionally.
Oh, which trolley is this?
San Diego, I'm on the San Diego riverfront, and it's a main line.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it is. But society being more or less mature, that wouldn't be the phrasing I would use. I would think about functioning level. I think the human is as mature as the human is, but the level of chronic anxiety would make a big difference, level of functioning. And
Mhm.
I don't know about violence as the primary marker. What I've been thinking about is that in a time where more empirical knowledge is available to many people in the world, more knowledge about what's happening, what causes a virus, what a virus is, what causes a pandemic, what's happening to the planet. This time when we have so much available facts, and there seems to be a growing segment of the population who's turning away from science and facts.
Okay.
And that's actually not just an American thing. And some fundamentalist movements. Boy, there's a big one active today in the news that seem to be very retrogressive, in my opinion, that are popping up all over the world. More extremist religions, more, sort of throwback, if you will, that's subjective beliefs.
I'm going to jump into the phrase anti-vaxxer, which is very timely right now. I think it's interesting, Lorna and Dave, and wonder what you see, to just kind of watch how the red hot polarized topic in the news just, kind of moves. It moves around. It pops around. So right now, red hot anti-vaxxer is red hot. And I was pleased to hear an NPR story a few days ago where they had a sociologist come on. And basically what she was doing was challenging what she considered the dehumanizing rhetoric about anti-vaxxers. And they were sort of wanting to just interview her about anti-vaxxers. And one thing she said was that, people who don't want to take the vaccine are a very diverse group, and that people can kind of project, whatever group they're most disgusted by upon this broad swath of anyone who doesn't want the vaccine. And I actually was just pleased process-wise that NPR would have someone talking like that on a big national show. So those are just some thoughts in response to what you just said, Lorna. You want to jump in with anything you've been thinking about or related to what we just spoke about, or on the general topic of polarization?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been thinking a lot about this. I live in Canada, but I am a U.S. citizen, and I have a very, very good friend who is not getting vaccinated, and we had a very interesting discussion. It turned out that he had several major events, like his mother dying, because of bad stuff in the hospitals. So he's got a history of a very bad experience with the medical system. And what I realized was that my anxiety around getting sick, I was kind of projecting onto him, in that he is a threat to me. But that threat, that perceived threat, is in proportion to how anxious I feel about getting sick. If I wasn't worried about getting sick, he wouldn't be a perceived threat to me. And so that was very interesting for me to think about. I need to take care of my stuff here. It's not his fault that I feel threatened. And so that was just one thing, like how much what's going on, or people are feeling threatened about a topic, and that other group represents that threat to them. And really, there's some degree of taking care of their own anxiousness themselves before they start blaming other to take care of them for them, as it were, if that makes sense, right? It's not his job to make me feel less anxious about getting sick as such. It's my job to think about what am I going to do to take care of myself. And so in that sense, he is completely free to choose to get vaccinated or not vaccinated. And I am completely free to choose how I'm going to keep myself safe, like not have him over for a visit. And so I think I'm not going to make him get vaccinated. I'm not going to impinge on him, but I don't believe he should be impinging on me in terms of any kind of safety issue. And so I think there's ways that less reactive people can manage that, in a thoughtful manner, right?
I just want to compliment you on even having this conversation with a friend, and curious, like what are the things that allow a person to do that? Because one of the features of polarization is the two sides stop talking to each other and live in echo chambers of their own ideas. And I think you may have articulated one of the core principles of success for being able to do that, which is that you're capable of looking at your most kind of intense reactivity about the topic that you're disagreeing with the other one, and taking responsibility, fundamental responsibility for the threat level you have as you described, or the what it is that's bothering you. And I have thought, Dave and Lorna, that when I hear people evaluate different political issues, I use a kind of a rubric in my mind. If I believe that there's someone who's capable of taking responsibility for their reactivity, say they've practiced that, or they just naturally are the kind of person who does that, I rate their opinions as more credible. I think they're more capable of looking at the situation objectively, or from a sort of leaderly, best for all viewpoint. And I just kind of watch the range in people I interact with in terms of that capacity.
Yeah, and I've come to think that behind all polarization is some kind of perceived threat going on that's born out of anxiousness and a togetherness process, right? So other wants me to think, feel, and act a certain way because they think my way of being threatens them. And I may get very reactive to that because of my perceived threat of feeling, thinking, acting like I think they want me to. And if I can just, I'm not going to allow somebody to impinge on me, but I'm also want to make sure I'm not trying to impinge on other. That, to me, that's a really important point is, follow the impingement, as it were. So I don't think we should necessarily be holding people down and jabbing them in the arm. But if somebody's in a store that's not been vaccinated, I don't know, I'd like to know that so I can choose whether or not I go into the store, right? Are they going to allow me choice to stay safe? And I'll allow them choice to stay safe as they perceive it. That's some of my
Do
thinking.
you think your friend was listening to you?
Oh yeah, he's a thoughtful guy. Like he's gonna wear a mask. He social distances. He's just not, he doesn't deny that there's a a pandemic going on. I don't know that he's got the right thinking on the risk level, but one infection can kind of ruin your whole day. But no, this is the interesting thing. You can talk to somebody and it's like intelligent, and then boom, they just fall off a cliff with some crazy thinking, in my opinion, right? And yes, I think he could hear me. But my mother didn't die because the hospital screwed up. So who knows how I would think if I'd had that experience. And I think I need to be respectful of that.
Lorna Hexabla, you got any thoughts you would like to add to this?
Well, I wanted to circle back to a point I made during our last conversation that Dr. Bowen, I think that the idea behind the concept of societal regression was the human's instinctive understanding of the depletion of resources and lack of available, we're a migratory species, get upset, you go start at your own village 20 miles away. We can't do that anywhere anymore. Evidently, we're trying to go to space and hang out in space. That doesn't seem very practical. I don't know if that's societal progress or regression, putting resources into hanging out in space. But at any rate, so tension is high. Over the pandemic, of course, is part of this, wrapped up in it, but over and above. And so is increasing polarization, the feeling of threat, which is real, not imaginary. Is it just going to get worse and worse? Is it inevitable? I see a couple of people have put comments in. I'd like to hear.
Yeah, so maybe we can start to pivot this over to a conversation with our group here. And the first thing Rebecca Massini asked, I'd like to know how violence is defined. And then she spoke about refugees, and maybe Rebecca, if you want to get in on the conversation here, you could. And I'll just tell you regarding how violence is defined by Pinker, and really he's a person who collects really high quality research and puts it into books. The thing I want to say about it is just far, far more carefully than any layperson. The people who do this kind of research are extremely careful about definitions. And when you read Pinker, I think many of you would have the experience of, wow, these people are very careful in what they do. And if you're interested in this phenomenon of violence declining, I recommend an article that the New Yorker published that you can find online for free on the Great Crime Decline. So if you Google the Great Crime Decline New Yorker, you'll find a book, article that reviews 3 books by sociologists that was published a few years ago about what they call the Great Crime Decline. And they're talking about the dramatic decrease in violence in American cities, and actually cities all across the world. Rebecca Massini, would you like to jump in and speak a little bit about this? Or you don't have to, but I want to invite you if you'd like to.
Sure. I guess I was thinking more about what Lorna was saying about, resources and how does that impact people's threat, and the fact that it appears, and it'd be interesting to find out how people research this, how do people discern what threats are real and what are perceived? And I am thinking about the change in climate, the change in resources, and that maybe I need to study refugees more and think about refugees, because there are so many refugees all around the world, and maybe there always have been. And you look at the United States, it was kind of a big nation of refugees from many countries, but now the refugees, it seems, they have nowhere to go. And that seems to be a real challenge in the world, and I guess for me, a perceived threat, perhaps a real threat in lots of areas around poverty, around terrorism, around possibly other issues. So that's where my thinking is going around that.
Thank you. Stephanie Lehar, would you like to tell us a little bit about the comment you made here? Again, I'm inviting you. I could read it, but I'd almost rather have you read it, or just tell us about it if you'd like to. You're muted right now. You're muted. Welcome, Stephanie.
I've done that a while. There's so much roiling about the Afghanistan situation. It's in all of our faces right now. And I mean, I know I can't help react to it. Mm-hmm. I was remembering more than 20 years ago now, I did some civil society work in Kazakhstan and came back with a much greater appreciation for how much the US agenda informed the USAID work. It was teaching people organizational development, which is a good thing, but there was a real agenda to it that was not the people's agenda, you might say, you know. And so I'm looking at how we're reacting to the, you know, the Taliban, or, you know, this group come into Afghanistan in contrast to what was there, and the good, bad stuff that's going on. I don't know if I have a great formulated thought about it, but I'm trying to be careful and curious.
Yeah, careful and curious, right, can be hard to find in the hot news cycle. And, you know, I think it's so amazing that there are so many people who are careful and curious out there. But Stephanie, I want to ask you, what do you think of this basic idea that, I guess another way to say what I was trying to say earlier to Dave is that, you know, if you're caught in reactivity to the stimulating news cycle, and you're experiencing a sense of threat and anger and outrage kind of on a cycling basis because of that, what you might call undifferentiation from the news cycle, that it's just really hard to stay curious.
Well, yeah, and you can, I mean, I think we're more complex than that. I think I can both be in a reactive cycle and have some curiosity. So it's not like, it's not like I'm trying to detach completely. It's that I'm just trying to be complex enough to entertain both.
I would like to invite Martin Homan to tell us a little bit about the Friedman's fable, The Bridge, and how you think that relates to what we're talking about here today.
Okay. I've been thinking about each side wants to bring the other side into their stuff. And the bridge is the one, the fable, the bridge is the one where you're going on your way. The person's decided to jump off the bridge. He's got a rope attached to it. And my approach is, okay, you want to jump off the bridge. I cannot be responsible for how you're going to function or react to how you're functioning, but I will be there for you. I will assist you in any way I can, but I have my life to live also. And I'm going to live it differently from yours. So it's almost like, from my perspective, almost like coming across, I cannot change you, but I can be there for you. And I am going to go on my direction, and I will be in conversation with you whenever you want to be in conversation. So not to get caught up in his need for me to save him, or my need to have him stay away from me. But that's the way I'm looking at the bridge.
Can I see a show of hands for those of you who have read this fable, The Bridge by Friedman? I'll just say, because there's some that didn't go up, it's a fascinating book, Friedman's Fables. And the detail that Martin didn't share is that the person hands you a rope. You're standing in the middle of a bridge over a big chasm, jumps off. Now you're holding the rope, you're holding them up, and they're off the edge of the bridge, and they refuse to climb back up. And he sort of presents this as a puzzle. What do you do? And you can't pull them up. You're not strong enough to pull them up. As a metaphor for the places we get into together.
But you can be there to help them. And that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm not strong enough to take on the whole world and the arguments in the world, but I am there to have conversations with people who might disagree with me about vaccination and not vaccinating, and what that all means. But
I'd like to ask a question to any of you, and certainly Lauren and Dave, if you want to get in this, is what are you learning about the art of dialoguing with people whose positions are upsetting to you?
Well, I'll go first, Lorna, this time. How's that? If I can manage my reactivity to stay really curious, I believe I'm going to learn some very interesting things. And because I, you know, and it may be that I'll learn that, wow, there's a way of looking at the world that I never thought of, you know, and I may completely disagree with it. But to me, it's more, I don't need them to change, but I don't necessarily want their view forced on me. That's the difference, I think. You know, somebody else had mentioned it before, right? Like, if you're going to jump off the bridge, you're free to do that. If I can help you a little bit, I will, but I'm not responsible to jump over with you.
I think it's this ability you've developed to manage the forcing of another's idea upon you. Maybe, you know, one of the foundations of being able to maintain curiosity in the face of someone you really disagree with.
Yeah, I think it's just really important. And so far, whenever I've done it well, it's been, you know, kind of like, wow, A, they weren't as bad as I thought. And B, it's like, okay, I can see where you're coming from. I disagree, but, you know, who knows what's right anyway, quite frankly. It's all just opinion to some degree. I mean, there are reality-based things that we get into then that you know, do have to be considered, right? If you drive ignoring stop sign and, you know, speed limits and street lights, there are consequences that impact more than yourself, and that's where I think it gets real tricky.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else want to jump in? Lorna, go ahead. Then Rob.
This has more to do with demeanor than anything, but I've always kind of thought Dave is more mature than I am. Certainly expressing being better at this listening when one has a strong opinion. I'm much calmer when I don't know the answer, or when I, you know, think I don't know the answer, than I am when I think I do have the answer. This situation with Afghanistan right now, oh no. And so I can listen to anybody. That's all.
I want to throw this in because it really relates to what Lorna just said. So another book that I think is very interesting in this space is by the University of Toronto psychologist Keith Stanovich, Stanovich. And it's called The Bias That Divides Us, The Science and Politics of My Side Thinking. So Stanovich has been researching this particular kind of bias, which he calls my side bias, for decades, and he summarizes it in this book. And to give you just a little blurb here, he argues provocatively that we don't live in a post-truth society, as has been claimed, but rather a my side society. Our problem is not that we are unable to value and respect truth and facts, but that we are unable to agree on commonly accepted truth and facts. And he goes on to explain that this my side bias is ubiquitous. It's pretty easy to show that it actually is just a human phenomenon. It exists. It's factual that it exists. And that it's very unpredictable. For example, intelligence does not inoculate us against it. So he finds intelligence and education are not good inoculators against this my side bias. So Rob Schachter, would you like to get in on this? What are you thinking about? You're muted, sir.
There you go. Okay. Stephanie and Dave, that phrase, careful and curious, it really catches my attention, because when I think, Eric, about, you know, you said, how do you deal with people that are disagreeable or that don't agree with you? What I'm learning, your question is, what are you learning about that? What I've learned, two things I've learned or am learning. One is that people that are disagreeable, at least to me, almost automatically stimulate my tunnel vision. It happens very fast. And the more intense it gets, the more I assume about the other person. and the more I typecast them, and so forth and so on. It's almost a cliche to say that. But when I think about that phrase, it's really caught my attention, careful and curious. If I can slip into that, what I've learned and am learning is that people are one hell of a lot more complex, of course, than I can even imagine. And that has been very useful to me. And one of the most useful ways has been to aid and encourage my listening, my tuning in, if you will. Now, there's more to all of this, but I wanted to get that thought out.
I appreciate you doing that. I would say that, I am completely fascinated by the art of doing this. And I don't consider myself very good at it. The more I learn about it, the more I'm aware of how weak my ability to do this is. But I find it a lot more interesting, actually, than kind of figuring out who's right. So who else would like to get in on this? I think Chris Smith, you have a comment in there. Would you like to share what you're thinking about, sir?
Sure. I'm in here in Washington, D.C., and it was just an article somebody wrote about how to host an effective meeting. And they cited George Washington, who got Hamilton and Jefferson in the same room and let them scream at each other. And 250 years later, basically we, the descendants of Hamilton and Jefferson, are still screaming at each other. It's our two-party system. But at many stages along the way, we've had to compromise to get it to function. And what seems to be missing today is the art of compromise, which is, and I'm thinking of as a sort of a newbie to Bowen theory. I think there's a temptation to say if I somehow move off my beliefs, I'm sacrificing self. And I'm not supposed to do that anymore. That's how I got in trouble to begin with. But the art of the deal, or cutting a deal, there's no that seems to have been degraded as a function in society. I think we've lost something by being willing to meet halfway. And how can we create more situations where people don't feel like they're losing by getting along with each other?
That's very interesting. Yeah, that you could be branded as, I think Lorna raised the term last time I interviewed her, but both sidism, which would be a kind of wishy-washiness. And Chris Smith raises this nuance in those of us who get into Bowen theory, live it, that I would welcome thoughts about, which is that line between maybe, not being a self, not taking stands on the one hand, and on the other side, this kind of lost in I'm right, and not having the capacity to listen and be curious, as you were just pointing to, Chris. Lorna, did you want to get in?
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts, not directly related to what you just said, but circling back. Intelligence and differentiation of self are not synonymous at all. And another polarization we're seeing is the conversation is around authoritarianism versus democracy. And the spring meeting at the Bowen Center was about dominant subordinate hierarchies. And the idea that these hierarchies are more pronounced at times of pinch, right? Let fewer resources or a higher level of threat. And just thinking about different species, and species with the most pronounced dominant subordinate hierarchies might be those that live in the harshest climates or have the most competition for resources. And does that apply? Is that related to a growing trend toward authoritarianism around the world, if indeed that's happening? I think that factors into this conversation as well.
Hey, Eric, I have a comment related to that and Chris's, and I think, I think we, like with clients, there's kind of a content level and there's an emotional process level. And I think that what can happen is, especially with politicians, the emotional process is their personal success and any threat to their personal success at getting reelected. And, you may be talking to them about an issue and wondering why they can't compromise. And I remember seeing so many news shows where people are talking about things at a rational level. And it's like, that's not what it's about. There's this emotional process going on underneath. And if that doesn't get addressed, it's going to be very hard to talk at a rational level about things. And yeah, certainly scarcity of resources will then just crank that whole thing up. One other idea I've had is that I'm not a primatologist, but my sense is things get all very reactive in a colony when the hierarchy is starting to be challenged and an alpha male is being challenged. And I think there's been a process maybe around the world, but certainly in North America, where the dominant socioeconomic group has been being challenged over the last 20 years or so, and that we may be seeing a lot of reactivity coming out of that. It's one idea I'm playing with. Let's put it that way. Thanks.
So one of the things I like doing in this space is giving people to go into a small group and chat. Sometimes the quieter voices get a chance to talk a little more in that space and maybe practice this art of curious listening. So I'm going to provide you with that opportunity now for, I don't know, about 6-7 minutes. I'm going to use the functionality in Zoom to make that happen. If you just bear with me here. And then there's a timer, and so you'll get a signal, and then we'll come back and have some more dialogue about this interesting topic. So see you soon. Is my screen still shared now, or?
No.
Okay, good. I'm chuckling at Amy Trimble's background message. Okay, folks, welcome back. I'm going to be interested to hear a few comments about what you're chatting about, what you learned, what was interesting to you. But before I do, I want to just share. Can you see my shared screen now? So what's coming up? I'm really excited about this conversation with Dr. Mike Kerr on September 1st. I think he's known to many of you. I asked him if we could have kind of just an informal improvisational chat, and I'm going to ask him questions like what he's learning lately about the art of helping people and how things have changed over the decades on his amazing journey with being an international leader in this body of knowledge. And I want to tell you about this conference that's coming up, 2-day conference, October 7th and 8th, on spirituality and family health. We have two amazing PhD neuroscientists, Arnaud Delorme from UCSD and Fred Travis from Irish International University, who are going to be with us, along with a bunch of different Bowen thinkers and an entrepreneur who has some interesting stories about spirituality and resilience after the loss of loved ones. And we're going to have a preview of that on September 9th with as many of these guests, speakers, and presenters as we can gather for this hour, and to give you a little bit of taste of them. And this conference, this 2-day conference, is going to be, I'm going to emphasize structured interaction. So it's going to be a conversation with experts giving presentations, but I'm going to try to tweak up the amount of interactive time that we have together. And I want to thank those of you who support VCFS, including Dave Galloway, whose quote we have here. Why does Dave support us? Because the value of the information he gets access to. And it's just very inspiring when people support us. We're a largely volunteer organization, and it's easy to do it online on our website, which you can find at btvt.org, or just Google Vermont Center for Family Studies. Also want to tell you, last call for our professional training program, which this gives you a little bit of a sense of the folks who are the kind of folks who do it. And we have received a donation, so that if you know people in a nonprofit organization who might be interested in doing this year-long training program, we meet for 7 mornings through the year. We have some scholarships for people who work in nonprofit organizations. Lastly, I still think this is an amazing recording of the conference we did on polarization leadership earlier this year. I think Matt Dickinson's presentation, scholarly presentation on the myth of a polarized America, is very thought-provoking. To give you the skinny, he thinks there's a lot of research that shows that the general public is not more polarized, but the political elites, including the media, are more polarized than ever before. And that also includes an amazing story by our faculty member, Kim Ziegelman, about the real, getting real with the mattress fiasco, a study in estrangement, and I would say estrangement leadership, polarization leadership. So those are some of the things that are included in that recording that you can purchase from us, and support us by purchasing it, and you can move around and listen to the parts of presentations that you want to. We got a few more minutes. Anybody want to get in and talk about what you experienced in your breakout? What were you thinking about? What did you hear that was interesting?
Well, the 2 ladies that I spoke with and talked about, just the idea of being curious and open and gratefulness, and it just reminded me that, I don't know of anybody that isn't trying to just do the best they can with their life, and just get on with things. And who knows how I would be if I had had all their background in programming. And so, to the degree that I can maintain a sense of curiosity, the seeking circuit in the brain actually helps dampen anxiety. And so, I on a good day, I can kind of remember this stuff. But my wife and daughter will tell you about other days.
It's been very precious to me over many decades now to have a community of people who are practicing this kind of thing. And that's one of the values I get from being part of the Bowen community. And trying to do our part to make that accessible using this show. So thanks, Dave. Good point. Anybody else? What are you learning about polarization leadership? This Matt Dickinson point that we're less polarized is so provocative because, I kind of keep in touch through the New Yorker, New York Times, some different TV news shows, Wall Street Journal. You almost never see anyone express the opinion that we might, as a nation, be less polarized than people think. It's an assumption that people make, that we are more polarized, but here you have a scholar, very careful scholar, citing research like a big University of Maryland study, very carefully done, that concludes that if you just talk to average people and you pose the questions in a certain way, you get a really different picture of the way people are. And that kind of fits with my own experience, that people like us on this call, maybe there's some politicians on the call, but tend to be more interested in this perspective of curious and listening to each other than you would think if you just paid attention to the news. So thanks for joining us, folks. Love to see you again soon. And stay curious. Take care.
Thank you.